The Galactic Council chambers hummed with the usual mixture of breathing apparatus, translation devices, and the soft click-clack of various alien appendages against polished surfaces. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat quietly in the human delegation section, her hands folded neatly in her lap as she observed the proceedings with practiced diplomatic composure. The Zephyrians were presenting their latest trade proposal, their crystalline bodies catching the artificial light as they gestured with delicate, wire-thin arms. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species listened with varying degrees of attention. The Karathi dozed in their environmental suits, their massive bulk requiring specialized seating. The insectoid Viridians chittered softly among themselves, their compound eyes never quite focusing on the speakers. Sarah had been humanity's representative to the Council for 3 years now, ever since Earth had been granted provisional membership. It was still hard to believe sometimes. Just 50 years ago, humans had thought they were alone in the universe. Now here she was, sitting among beings that would have been pure science fiction in her grandmother's time. The Zephyrian speaker concluded with a melodic chime that their translators converted to Standard Galactic. We believe this mineral exchange will benefit all participating civilizations, particularly those in the Outer Rim territories. Council leader Vexhai, a towering figure with purple skin and for arms, gestured for questions. The usual suspects raised their appendages, tentacles, or energy projections. The Altarians wanted clarification on shipping routes. The Centaurians questioned environmental impact assessments. Standard diplomatic procedure, all very civilized. Sarah found herself thinking about her daughter back on Earth, probably just waking up for school. The time difference between Earth and the Council Station was something she'd never quite gotten used to. Maya would be eating breakfast, complaining about her mathematics homework, completely unaware that her mother was sitting in a room with beings who could manipulate gravity with their thoughts or photosynthesize their own nutrients. The human delegation has been unusually quiet today, Vexhai observed, his voice carrying a hint of what might have been amusement. Ambassador Chun, does your species have any input on this trade proposal? All eyes, sensors, and detection organs turned towards Sarah. She stood smoothly, her movements precise despite the slightly lower gravity of the station. Thank you, Council Leader. Humanity appreciates being included in these discussions. We find the proposal interesting. The Zephyrian who had presented the proposal, Clara, Sarah remembered, chimed what sounded like pleasure. The humans have always been cooperative trading partners. We value their unique perspectives. Sarah smiled, that carefully neutral diplomatic expression she'd perfected over years of negotiations. We're curious about the security arrangements for these shipping lanes. The Outer Rim can be unpredictable. A ripple of what might have been nervous energy passed through the chamber. The Outer Rim territories were notorious for pirate activities, mostly from species not yet advanced enough for Council membership. It was a delicate subject. The Council preferred to handle such matters through economic incentives rather than direct action. Our preliminary scans suggest minimal hostile presence, Clara responded, though her crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. Standard escort protocols should suffice. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Of course. We were simply wondering if you considered the seasonal migration patterns in Sector 7. The Drac spawning season begins in approximately 60 standard days. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could feel the sudden shift in attention, though she maintained her pleasant expression. The Drac were not Council members. They were barely sentient by galactic standards. But they were also 12 meters long, traveled in swarms of thousands, and had a tendency to attack anything that moved during their mating frenzies. The Drac, Clara S. chime, was noticeably higher pitched. We were not aware they would be a significant factor. Oh, they shouldn't be, Sarah said casually. As long as the shipping convoys avoid their traditional hunting grounds during the 3-month spawning cycle. Of course, that would require a significant detour through the asteroid fields in Sector 9, which do contain elevated radiation levels. And the Korgan separatists have been active in that region lately. Vexai leaned forward in his elevated chair. Ambassador Chun, are you suggesting the proposed route is inadvisable? Sarah's smile never wavered. Not at all, Council Leader. I'm simply providing additional data points that might be relevant to the security assessment. After all, a successful trade route benefits everyone, doesn't it? The silence stretched longer this time. Sarah could practically hear the mental calculations happening around the chamber as various species reconsidered what had seemed like a straightforward proposal. The humans were newcomers to galactic civilization, but they had a reputation for being remarkably well-informed about things other species overlooked. Perhaps, Vexhai said slowly, we should table this proposal for further study. Clara's form flickered with what Sarah had learned indicated distress. Council Leader, if I may, motioned to table carries, Vexhai announced firmly. We'll revisit this matter once all relevant factors have been properly assessed. As the session moved on to other business, Sarah settled back into her seat, maintaining her diplomatic composure. Around her, she could sense the subtle shift in how the other delegates regarded the human section. What they didn't understand, what none of them seemed to grasp, was that humans didn't just study trade routes and shipping manifests. Humans studied everything. Every migration pattern, every terrorist cell, every political faction, every environmental hazard. It wasn't because they were particularly brilliant or technologically advanced. It was because, unlike most galactic civilizations, humans had evolved as persistence hunters. And persistence hunters never, ever stopped gathering information about their environment. The session concluded with the usual diplomatic pleasantries, and delegates began filing out to their respective quarters. Sarah gathered her datapad and notes, already composing her report to Earth. The Council thought they were dealing with just another cooperative species, eager to fit into galactic civilization. They had no idea they were looking at a predator 3 weeks after the trade route incident. Sarah found herself in an emergency council session. The chamber buzzed with unusual energy as delegates hurried to their positions, many looking visibly distressed despite the vast differences in their physiologies. Council Leader Vexhai called for order, his 4 arms gesturing for calm. Fellow beings, we face an unprecedented crisis. The Nexus trade station has gone silent. The Nexus was more than just a trade station. It was the economic heart of the Outer Rim, a massive structure housing nearly 2 million beings from dozens of species. Sarah felt a genuine chill run down her spine. This wasn't about diplomatic maneuvering anymore. When was last contact? Asked diplomat Zethka, the Altarian representative. Their blue, gel-like form rippled with concern. 47 hours ago, Vexhai replied grimly. All communication attempts have failed. Long-range sensors detect the station is still structurally intact, but there are no life sign readings. A wave of shocked chittering and harmonics filled the chamber. 2 million beings didn't just vanish without a trace. The mathematical impossibility of such an event was staggering. Clara, the Zephyrian whose trade proposal had been tabled, chimed in with barely controlled panic. Council Leader, 3 of our merchant vessels were en route to Nexus. We cannot reach them either. Nor can we contact our mining operation in that sector, added Commander Horth of the Karathi military. 6 ships radio silent. Sarah watched as more reports flooded in. The picture was becoming clear, and it was far worse than anyone had initially thought. The entire Nexus sector, roughly 3 light years in diameter, had become a dead zone. No communications in or out. No ships entering or leaving. Could it be some kind of natural phenomenon? Suggested Dr. Yilmoth of the Centaurian Science Collective. A gravitational anomaly? Quantum field disruption? Unlikely, Vexhai responded. Our preliminary analysis suggests no unusual stellar activity in the region. The silence appears to be selective, artificial. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If someone or something had the power to neutralize an entire sector of space, including a station the size of a small moon, then the entire galactic community was potentially at risk. We need a reconnaissance mission, declared General Crextor of the Valdorian Defense Corps. A full battle fleet to investigate and respond to whatever threat we're facing. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Valdorians were one of the most militarily advanced species in the Council, their ships equipped with devastating particle weapons and shield technology. If anyone could handle this crisis, it would be them. Sarah cleared her throat gently. The sound was barely audible, but somehow it carried in the chamber's acoustics. Council leader, if I may. Vexai gestured for her to speak. The floor recognizes Ambassador Chun. Thank you. Sarah stood, her datapad in hand. Before we commit military resources, perhaps we should gather more intelligence about what we're facing. General Crextor's chitinous plates rattled, the Valdorian equivalent of a dismissive snort. Ambassador, with respect, reconnaissance is exactly what I'm proposing. My battle groups are equipped with the finest sensor arrays in the galaxy. I understand, General. But consider this. Whatever happened at Nexus was able to neutralize 2 million beings and dozens of ships without triggering any distress signals. That suggests either overwhelming force or something more subtle. Sarah activated her datapad, projecting a three-dimensional map of the affected region. If we examine the pattern of disappearances, there's something interesting. The merchant ships that went missing weren't all heading to Nexus. 3 were bound for different destinations entirely, but all used similar flight paths. She highlighted several routes on the map, her finger tracing the commonalities. These paths all pass through the outer edge of the Drax spawning grounds. The chamber fell silent. Plera's crystalline form visibly dimmed. Surely you're not suggesting the Drac are responsible? They're barely sentient creatures. Not the Drac themselves, Sarah agreed. But consider, during spawning season, they become incredibly aggressive. Any ship passing through their territory would either have to fight their way through thousands of hostile creatures, or find another way around, finished Dr. Yilmoth slowly. But what does that have to do with Nexus Station? Sarah manipulated the holographic display, zooming out to show a broader view of local space. If you're avoiding the Drac migrations, and you want to reach any of these destinations, there's really only one practical route: through the Keth Nebula. The name sent another wave of unease through the chamber. The Keth Nebula was notorious for its sensor-dampening properties and unstable energy fields. Most civilized species avoided it entirely. The nebula would provide perfect cover for someone to intercept shipping traffic, Sarah continued. And if they had established a base of operations there, it would explain why we can't get sensor readings from the affected area. General Crextor leaned forward. You're suggesting pirates? With that level of capability? Not ordinary pirates, Sarah said quietly. Someone with advanced technology and careful planning. Someone who studied our shipping patterns, our communication protocols, our defensive weaknesses. Someone who waited for exactly the right moment to strike. The implications were staggering. The galactic community had grown complacent over millennia of relatively peaceful coexistence. Most species had evolved past their aggressive phases, developing into civilized, cooperative societies. The idea that someone could systematically exploit their peaceful nature was almost incomprehensible. Vexai's 4 hands gripped his chair arms tightly. If your theory is correct, Ambassador, then we're facing an enemy who has been studying us. Preparing. Sarah nodded grimly. And they're very good at it. Good enough to neutralize one of our most important installations without us even knowing how they did it. The chamber erupted in nervous discussion. Some delegates called for immediate military action. Others suggested evacuating the Outer Rim territories entirely. The Zephyrians wanted to close all trade routes until the crisis was resolved. But Sarah was thinking about something else entirely. She was thinking about humanity's own history, about the long evolutionary path that had brought her species to this point. Humans had spent millions of years as hunters, developing instincts and capabilities that their civilized galactic neighbors had long since lost. And sometimes, to catch a predator, you needed another predator. Council leader, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Humanity would like to volunteer for the reconnaissance mission. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. It was the silence of prey animals realizing they might be looking at something dangerous. Ambassador, Vexai said carefully, your species has no significant military space fleet. What could you possibly contribute to such a mission? Sarah's smile was sharp and cold, lacking entirely the diplomatic warmth she usually projected. For just a moment, 2 million years of human evolution showed through her civilized veneer. We know how to hunt. The human ship Persistence looked embarrassingly small next to the Valdorian battle cruiser Righteous Thunder, where the alien vessel bristled with weapons arrays and shield generators. The human craft appeared almost primitive, a simple, angular design with basic hull plating and minimal external features. Captain Marcus Webb stood on his bridge, watching through the view screen as General Krextor's massive warship took point position for their approach to the Keth Nebula. Behind them, a handful of other Council vessels maintained careful distance, science ships mostly, with observers from various species eager to witness how this crisis would be resolved. Captain, called his communications officer, Lieutenant Park. General Krextor is requesting a status update. Tell the General we're ready to proceed, Webb replied, settling into his command chair. All systems nominal. What he didn't mention was that half of those systems would be completely alien to his galactic allies. The Persistence had been designed specifically for this mission, incorporating technologies that humanity had developed in secret over the past 3 years. Technologies based on a very different philosophy than what the rest of the galaxy employed. While other species built bigger ships with more powerful weapons, humans had focused on something else entirely: the ability to find, track, and understand their quarry. The Persistence was less of a warship and more of a hunter's trap. Entering the nebula's outer boundary, reported Navigator Chun. No relation to the ambassador, despite the common surname. Visibility dropping to near zero. On the main screen, the star field vanished behind a roiling wall of ionized gas and cosmic debris. The Keth Nebula was a graveyard of ancient stellar collisions, its chaotic energy fields playing havoc with most sensor systems. Persistence asterisk, this is Righteous Thunder, came General Krextor's voice over the comm. We're experiencing significant sensor degradation. Recommend we proceed with extreme caution. Acknowledged, General, Webb replied. We're still tracking normally. It was a small lie. The Persistence's sensors were indeed working perfectly, but not in any way the Valdorians would recognize. Instead of relying on active scans that could be detected and jammed, the human ship was equipped with an array of passive detection systems. They listened instead of looking, tracking heat signatures, gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic emissions, the subtle traces that any technological civilization inevitably left behind. Captain, whispered his sensor officer, Specialist Rodriguez. I'm reading multiple energy signatures ahead. Approximately 2,000 kilometers, bearing 17 Mark IV. Webb leaned forward. Configuration. Artificial structures. Definitely not natural formations. Reading at least 12 large objects, possibly more masked by the interference. Webb called. We're detecting possible artificial constructs ahead. Recommend full stop while we analyze the contacts. The Valdorian battle cruiser immediately began decelerating, its massive bulk making the maneuver somewhat ungraceful. Webb watched with professional interest as the alien ship's running lights dimmed, presumably to avoid detection. What General Krextor didn't understand was that stealth in space was largely about not being where your enemy expected you to be. The Valdorian ship was still broadcasting its presence in dozens of ways. Heat exhaust, gravitational disturbance, electromagnetic signatures from its own systems. To anyone with the right sensors, it might as well have been firing signal flares. Rodriguez, what are we looking at? Multiple ship configurations, Captain. Definitely not Council designs. Some appear to be converted merchant vessels, but heavily modified. I'm reading weapon signatures consistent with military-grade particle cannons and torpedo launchers. How many ships total? Conservative estimate? At least 20 vessels of various sizes. They're arranged in a defensive formation around what appears to be a large central structure. Webb nodded grimly. This was exactly what they'd expected to find. A pirate base using the nebula as cover, equipped with captured or stolen military hardware. But knowing what you were looking for and actually dealing with it were two very different things. Captain, called Lieutenant Park from Communications. General Krextor is requesting our tactical assessment. Tell him we count approximately 20 hostile vessels in a defensive formation. Recommend we withdraw and call for reinforcements. It was the sensible thing to do. The smart thing. The righteous thunder was powerful, but 20 ships was overwhelming odds even for a Valdorian battlecruiser. Standard military doctrine called for a fighting retreat followed by a larger assault with proper numerical superiority. But Webb wasn't following standard military doctrine. Sir, Rodriguez whispered, I'm reading something else. Energy signatures consistent with a large-scale containment system. Whatever they've got in there, it's big. The Nexus survivors? Possibly. The power requirements would be consistent with maintaining life support for a large population. That changed everything. If the pirates were holding 2 million hostages, a direct assault was out of the question. Too much risk of collateral damage. The Council would have to negotiate, probably paying an enormous ransom and setting a precedent for future attacks. Unless someone could eliminate the threat quietly. Webb smiled, a predator's expression that his bridge crew had learned to recognize. Rodriguez, give me a complete breakdown of their sensor coverage. I want to know every blind spot in their detection grid. Sir, Park, send a message to General Krextor. Tell him we're going to conduct a closer reconnaissance. Advise him to maintain position and be ready to provide covering fire if needed. Captain, interrupted his first officer, Commander Torres. Sir, with respect, a single ship against 20 is suicide. Webb turned to face his senior staff. They were all young, all volunteers for this mission, all carefully selected for very specific criteria. Not just skill and courage, but the ability to think like hunters rather than soldiers. Torres, what's the first rule of persistence hunting? The first officer straightened. Don't chase your prey, Captain. Make them come to you. Exactly. We're not going to fight 20 ships. Webb's smile grew wider. We're going to make them fight each other. On the main screen, the nebula swirled with hidden menace. Somewhere in that cosmic fog, pirates held 2 million innocent beings hostage, secure in their technological superiority and tactical advantage. They had superior numbers, superior firepower, and perfect defensive positioning. What they didn't have was 2 million years of human evolutionary programming telling them that sometimes the deadliest predator was the one you never saw coming. Take us in, Navigator. Nice and quiet. The Persistence began its approach, sliding through the nebula like a ghost. Its passive sensors tracked every energy signature, every communication burst, every minute detail of the enemy formation. And in the depths of space, humanity prepared to do what it had always done best. Hunt hashtag without warning, humanity's predator instinct shocks the Council. Part 4, the Persistence drifted through the outer edge of the pirate formation like a piece of cosmic debris, its engines barely registering above background radiation. Captain Webb watched the tactical display as his ship moved between the enemy vessels, undetected and seemingly insignificant. Position report, he whispered. We're inside their perimeter, Captain, Navigator Chin replied softly. Approximately 800 kilometers from his central structure. On the main screen, enhanced by their passive sensors, the pirate base finally came into view. It was a nightmare of salvage technology, pieces of destroyed Council ships welded together into a massive, sprawling complex. Weapons bristled from every surface, and the energy readings suggested shields powerful enough to withstand a sustained fleet bombardment. Rodriguez, what's our status on the containment system? Confirmed, Captain. Large-scale life support and containment fields. The power signature suggests they're holding approximately 2 million beings in suspended animation. Webb felt a cold rage settle in his chest. The pirates hadn't just captured the Nexus station population. They put them all into artificial comas, turning 2 million sentient beings into stored cargo. It was efficient, practical, and utterly monstrous. "Sir," Torres whispered from the tactical station, "I count 23 ships in total. Mix of converted merchants and actual military vessels. Looks like they've been at this for a while. Any identification on the ship configurations?" "Several designs I don't recognize, but some of the military vessels appear to be hegemony class. Those went missing in the border wars 15 years ago." Webb nodded grimly. The hegemony had been a militant faction that tried to conquer several outer rim systems before being defeated by a council coalition. Everyone had assumed their remaining forces had been destroyed or scattered. Apparently, some had survived and turned to piracy. "Captain," Rodriguez called urgently, "I'm reading a patrol ship heading our way. Distance closing fast." On the display, a small craft was breaking away from the main formation, its trajectory bringing it directly toward the Persistence. Their stealth had been good, but not perfect. Something had caught the pirates' attention. "Options?" Webb asked quietly. "We could try to run," Torres suggested. "If we go to full power, we might be able to escape their sensor range before they get a positive identification. Or we take them out quietly and continue the mission." Webb considered the alternatives. Running meant abandoning the hostages and returning to the council with nothing but confirmation that the pirates were too well defended for a direct assault. It meant negotiation, ransom payments, and the certainty that this would happen again. Target their engines and communications array, he decided. Make it look like a mechanical failure. The Persistence had weapons, but not the massive particle cannons favored by most galactic militaries. Instead, it carried an array of precision instruments designed for surgical strikes. Focused electromagnetic pulses, micro-torpedoes, targeted energy beams that could disable specific systems without destroying an entire vessel. "Target acquired," Torres reported. Firing. The attack was so subtle, it was almost invisible. Brief energy pulses that overloaded the patrol ship's drive systems and communication equipment. To anyone watching, it would look like the vessel had suffered a catastrophic power failure. The patrol ship went dark, drifting helplessly as its emergency systems struggled to compensate. Within minutes, it would either restore power or send a distress signal. Either way, their window of opportunity was closing. "Captain, I'm reading something else," Rodriguez said urgently. "There's another ship moving in the base's interior structure, much larger than the others. It's powering up some kind of massive energy weapon." Webb felt ice in his veins. "Target. Computing trajectory." "Sir, it's aimed at the containment facility." The implications hit the bridge like a physical blow. The pirates had a dead man switch. If they were discovered or threatened, they would murder 2 million hostages rather than risk capture. It was the ultimate insurance policy, turning their victims into human shields. Time to firing? At current power-up rate, approximately 12 minutes. 12 minutes to save 2 million lives. Webb's mind raced through possibilities, discarding option after option. A direct assault was impossible. Even if they could somehow defeat 23 enemy ships, they couldn't do it in 12 minutes. Calling for help was pointless for the same reason. But there was another way, a very human way. "Torres, how many ships do we count in their outer defensive line?" "Approximately 8 vessels, sir. Mixed configuration. And how many of those appear to be former military?" "4 definite, possibly 5. Webb smiled grimly. "Rodriguez, can you isolate the communication frequencies for the ex-military vessels?" "Sir, I want to know exactly which ships are crewed by former hegemony forces and which are ordinary pirates. There's a difference between soldiers and criminals." As his censor officer worked, Webb began formulating a plan that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. It required understanding psychology, exploiting centuries-old grudges, and manipulating enemies into destroying each other. It required thinking like a predator. "Got it, Captain Rodriguez reported. 3 ships are definitely broadcasting on old hegemony military frequencies. 2 more are using civilian pirate channels, but their engine signatures match stolen military vessels. Excellent. Park, open a channel to the hegemony ships. Use their old military encryption codes. Sir, we don't have... Yes, we do, Webb interrupted. Humanity has been monitoring and decoding galactic military communications for 3 years. We have everyone's codes. The admission sent a shock through his bridge crew, but there was no time to explain. In 10 minutes, 2 million innocent beings would die unless they could turn this pirate alliance against itself. Channel open, Captain. Webb took a deep breath, then spoke in the clipped, formal tones of a military commander. Hegemony vessels. This is Captain Webb of the Terran Survey Corps. We know what you're planning, and we're here to offer you a better deal. The response came almost immediately. Angry, suspicious voices speaking in the harsh consonants of the old hegemony dialect. Unknown vessel. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. Check your sensors, gentlemen. We're inside your perimeter, undetected by your sensors, close enough to target any of your ships. If we wanted you dead, you'd already be floating debris. A pause. Then a different voice, more controlled. What do you want, human? I want to discuss the future of this operation, because in about 9 minutes, someone's going to fire on those hostages. And when that happens, the Council is going to send everything they have to hunt down everyone responsible. Another pause. Longer this time. But here's the thing about mass murder, Webb continued conversationally. It tends to unite people against you. Right now, you've got a profitable piracy operation. Nobody's going to start a war over stolen cargo. But kill 2 million civilians? That becomes a crusade. Get to the point, human. Webb's smile was sharp as a blade. The point is this. Those civilian pirates you're working with are about to destroy your entire future. When the Council comes for revenge, do you really think they're going to distinguish between professional soldiers and common criminals? And then he waited, knowing that the most dangerous words in any language were the ones that made people think. The silence stretched across the communication channel for nearly 30 seconds before the hegemony commander responded. When he did, his voice carried the weight of a man who understood exactly what Webb was offering. Explain this better deal, human. Simple, Webb replied, watching the countdown timer that showed 6 minutes remaining. You eliminate the civilian pirate leadership before they can execute the hostages. In exchange, you get safe passage out of Council space and a 10-hour head start before we report your position. You're asking us to turn on our allies. I'm asking you to choose between temporary allies and permanent survival. Once those civilians are dead, there's nowhere in the galaxy you'll be able to hide. The Council will hunt you forever. But if the hostages survive, this stays a piracy case instead of becoming genocide. Webb could hear urgent conversations in the background, hegemony officers discussing the proposal in their harsh military dialect. Meanwhile, his tactical display showed other pirate ships beginning to shift position, apparently detecting some kind of tension in the formation. Captain, Torres whispered, the civilian ships are moving to surround the hegemony vessels. I think they're getting suspicious. Rodriguez, status on that weapon charging sequence. 4 minutes, 30 seconds, sir. Time was running out. Webb made a command decision that would have horrified every diplomat in the galaxy. Hegemony ships, you now have incoming hostile contacts. 3 civilian vessels are moving to attack positions around your formation. Suggest you respond accordingly. It was a complete lie. The civilian pirates were simply repositioning based on some unknown tactical consideration. But the hegemony commanders, already primed for betrayal by Webb's offer, interpreted the movement as an attack. All hegemony vessels, this is Commander Vask, came the urgent broadcast. Civilian ships are attempting to neutralize our position. Weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. The first particle beam lit up the nebula like lightning. Within seconds, the entire pirate formation dissolved into chaos as former allies opened fire on each other. The hegemony ships, with their superior military training and equipment, held the initial advantage, but they were outnumbered nearly 2-1. "Sir," Park called from communications, "I'm reading multiple distress signals. The civilian pirates are calling for reinforcement." "From who?" Webb asked. "Unknown, but there are at least 6 more ships moving in from the outer nebula. Larger vessels, heavily armed." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. What had started as a 3-way conflict was about to become a major fleet engagement, and in the middle of it all, 2 million hostages were still under threat from that charging weapon. "Rodriguez, can you identify the ship with the hostage killer?" "Affirmative. It's a converted heavy cruiser, probably the command vessel. Still charging weapons, but the power fluctuation suggests they're having trouble maintaining focus with all the fighting going on." Webb studied the tactical display. The converted cruiser was positioned at the center of the base complex, protected by the outer defensive ring. But that ring was now scattered, individual ships engaged in desperate combat with each other. For the first time since they'd arrived, there was a clear path to the target. "Navigator, plot an intercept course for the command vessel. Maximum acceleration." "Sir, that will put us directly in the middle of a fleet battle. Exactly where no one will be expecting a single human ship," Webb replied grimly. "Torres, prepare all weapons. Target their power systems first, then their weapon arrays. We need to disable that ship without destroying the hostages." The Persistence leaped forward, accelerating toward the heart of the pirate base while energy beams and torpedoes crisscrossed the space around them. It was insanity by any conventional military standard, a single small ship charging into a major battle. But conventional military standards didn't account for the human approach to warfare. "Incoming fire," Torres called. "One of the civilian ships has us targeted. Evasive maneuvers. Don't return fire unless they're actually hitting us." Webb's strategy was counterintuitive but effective. By not shooting back, the Persistence didn't register as a primary threat to any of the combatants. They were like a scavenger running between fighting predators, dangerous only if cornered, not worth wasting ammunition on during a larger battle. 2 minutes to weapon discharge, Rodriguez reported. The converted cruiser loomed larger on the main screen, its hull scarred by years of combat and jury-rig modifications. Gun ports bristled along its length, but most were aimed outward to defend against external threats. Its commanders had never anticipated an attack from inside their own perimeter. "Torres, you have the target?" "Locked on their main power coupling. If I can overload their primary reactor, it should cascade through their entire weapons grid." "Fire." The Persistence's precision weapons spoke in near silence, invisible beams of focused energy striking the cruiser's hull with surgical accuracy. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the great ship's running lights flickered, and its weapons arrays began powering down. "Direct hit," Torres reported triumphantly. "Their main weapons are offline." But Webb wasn't celebrating yet. "Rodriguez, life support status on the hostage compartments?" "Still functioning, sir. Emergency power systems are maintaining containment." Around them, the battle was reaching its conclusion. The hegemony forces had managed to destroy or disable most of the civilian pirate ships, but they'd taken heavy casualties in the process. Only 3 of the original military vessels remained combat effective, and reinforcements were still approaching from the outer nebula. "Captain," Park called urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from General Krextor. The Righteous Thunder is requesting immediate assistance." Webb almost laughed. The Valdorian commander had spent the entire battle waiting at the nebula's edge, probably trying to make sense of the energy signatures and confused communications they were detecting. Now, with the pirate formation destroyed and the immediate threat neutralized, he was ready to charge in and claim credit for the victory. "Tell the general that the situation is under control," Webb replied. "Hostile forces neutralized, hostages secure. We'll need medical ships and transport vessels to evacuate the survivors." "Sir, should I mention our role in encouraging the pirates to fight each other?" Webb considered the question carefully. The truth was that humanity had just demonstrated capabilities that would terrify their galactic allies almost as much as their enemies. The ability to infiltrate enemy positions, manipulate communications, and turn hostile forces against each other was not what the Council expected from their newest members. No, he decided finally. Official report will state that we conducted reconnaissance and targeted the weapon threatening civilian lives. The pirates destroyed each other due to internal conflicts, which is technically true. Over the next several hours, Council rescue ships arrived to begin the massive operation of reviving and evacuating 2 million hostages. Medical teams worked around the clock to reverse the effects of the suspended animation systems. Transport vessels ferried survivors to safety. The pirate base was systematically dismantled, its weapons and technology confiscated. And through it all, the Persistence remained quietly in the background, just another Council ship helping with the humanitarian effort. The Valdorians claimed credit for breaking up the pirate alliance. The Zephyrians praised their own trade route analysis for identifying the threat. Various species congratulated themselves on their cooperation and quick response. But Ambassador Sarah Chun, monitoring the situation from the Council chambers, understood exactly what had happened. She'd seen the communication logs, the battle recordings, the careful precision with which her species had dismantled a threat that should have been impossible to defeat. When Captain Webb's official report reached her desk, she read it twice before filing it away. The galaxy thought it had witnessed a lucky break. Pirates turning on each other due to internal strife, allowing a heroic rescue mission to succeed against impossible odds. What they'd actually witnessed was humanity's first demonstration that they were no longer the naive newcomers who had begged for admission to galactic civilization 3 years ago. They were predators, evolved and refined by millions of years of persistence hunting, now adapted to the vast hunting ground of space itself. The Council believed they had gained a useful new member species, cooperative, helpful, and appropriately grateful for their acceptance into galactic society. They had no idea they had invited apex predators into their midst. And as long as humanity's interests aligned with the Council's peaceful goals, that would never become a problem. Sarah Chan smiled her diplomatic smile and began composing her next report to Earth, where other hunters were already studying the galaxy's shipping lanes, defense networks, and political structures with the patient attention of a species that had never learned to stop gathering intelligence about its environment. The Council thought the crisis was over. For humanity, it had only just begun.